Hello, Cubs, and happy Friday. We're going to get into our read aloud, the Phantom Tollbooth, in a moment. But before we get started, I wanted to share the answer that you guys gave to my questions yesterday. And my question yesterday was about this quote right here. Let me find it. Here it is. This is what, remember the Mathemagician was talking about his staff, which is a big pencil, right? And here's the, true enough, agreed the Mathemagician. And here's the question, here's what I ask you about. What does it mean? But once you learn to use it, there is no end to what you can do. So that's the question I asked you about, the quote I asked you about. And I got some great answers. So Mason said, if you use something, it will never run out. Mm-hmm. So if you use a pencil, it will never run out. Mm-hmm. And Srivatsa, said, if you can use it, you can do. If you can use it, you can do anything else. So like using a pencil, if you can use a pencil, you can do anything. And that's kind of cool. Nishrita says that means you could practice to get things right. So you could practice with a pencil to get things right. I guess because it has an eraser. Diley says, if you know how to do something, you do it and you can do it again. So it's like you can use your pencil to do something and then do it again. Tanish says the pencil is unlimited, and I wonder what he means by that, but maybe somebody else said that. Houston says, with a pencil, there's nothing you can't do. I think that's pretty cool. You can do a lot of stuff. Trinity says, it won't run out, like a pencil doesn't run out. Shreya says, if you learn to use a pencil, you can do anything. Louisa again said, you can use it again. Sarvanch says, if you use it right, you can do anything. And Kaden says, once you learn on a pencil, you can do anything. So I think a lot of those are they're great answers, first of all. So congratulations for being brave enough to share your thoughts about the quote, because, again, books can mean many things to many people, right? They might mean something different to you than they do to me. And that's fine. To me, Miss Candleberry, when I read that quote, I think about how it says what is he? I was going to read it one more time. Well, I thought that was. It's right here. Sorry, guys. I was gonna read it one more time. When we read that, to me, I can't for whatever reason right now. But when you learn to use it, there's no end to what you can do. I think it means that, like, a pencil, not that it's like you can't, it'll last forever, because my pencils don't last forever, but maybe you have a special one that does. I guess mechanical pencils can last a really long time. But Miss Candleberry thinks what it really means is, for myself at least, I think it means, let me just keep saying that because Miss Candleberry it's early in the morning. Miss Candleberry is finding her thoughts. To me, it means that, like, pencils, as you guys said, you can do so many things with a pencil. You can draw, you can write, you can do equations, you can do all these amazing things just with one little pencil. And so much of the ways that we express ourselves can be you use a pencil to do that, like writing. You express yourself with words, you express yourself with math, you can express all these creative things that we do. We can do with a pencil. And I think that that's one of the things that make it very special, is all the things that you can do with it. And the fact that, you can erase and make it better and better and better. So you can improve on all of these things. So I think that that's the reason why a pencil is kind of so special, and you can do anything. Because you can keep getting better at the things that you do, and you keep improving. Anyway, let's start chapter 16, A Very Dirty Bird. Now, if you will remember, Milo, at the end of the last chapter, he started going up this flight of stairs to where? To infinity. And in case you don't know what infinity is, remember that's what the Mathematician says, you never really get to it. It just goes on and on forever, right? Like counting. You never are going to get to the largest number or the smallest number, because you can keep thinking of larger numbers and keep thinking of smaller numbers. They keep going on and on forever. And that's infinity, something that goes on and on forever and doesn't stop. Like, people believe that, like, space is infinite, means it goes on and on forever. And as far as we know, it never stops. I mean, we can't tell if it stops. So those are things that kind of go on and on forever with no stopping. And Milo is now climbing his staircase to infinity. So think right now, make a prediction in your mind. Do you think Milo is going to reach infinity? All right, so here we go. 16, a very dirty bird. Up he went, very quickly at first, then more slowly, then in a little while even more slowly than that, and finally, after many minutes of climbing up the endless stairway, one weary foot was barely able to follow the other. Milo suddenly realized that with all of his effort, he was no closer to the top than when he began, and not a great deal further from the bottom. But he struggled on for a little while longer, until at last, completely exhausted, he collapsed onto one of the steps. I should have known it, he mumbled, resting his tired legs and filling his lungs with air. This is just like the line that goes on forever, and I'll never get there. You wouldn't much like it anyway, someone replied gently. Infinity is a dreadfully poor place. They can never manage to make ends meet. Milo looked up with his head still resting heavily in his hand, and he became quite accustomed to being addressed at the oddest of times in the oddest of places by the... Oh, I'm sorry. That was the wrong voice. So I'm going to go back and read that. Miss Candleberry was reading that in her bird voice, and I forgot it's not the bird. Well, you wouldn't like it much anyway. I gotta make that in a different voice, huh? You wouldn't much like it anyway. Sorry, I'm gonna have to use my other voice that I used for the other kid. Someone replied gently, Infinity is a dreadfully poor place. How about this? They never can manage to make ends meet. Milo looked up, his head still resting heavily in his hand. He was becoming quite accustomed to be addressed at the oddest times in the oddest places by the oddest people. And this time he was not at all disappointed. Standing next to him was exactly one half a small child who had been divided neatly from top to bottom. Pardon me for staring, said Milo after he had been staring for some time. But I've never seen half a child before. It's 5.8 to be precise, replied the child from the left side of his mouth, which happened to be the only side of his mouth. I beg your pardon? Asked Milo. It's 5.8, he repeated. It's a little more than half. Have you always been that way? Asked Milo impatiently, for he felt that this was a needlessly fine distinction. Oh, no. My goodness, no, the child assured him. A few years ago, I was just 4.42, and believe me, that was terribly inconvenient. What's the rest of your family like? Asked Milo. This time a bit more sympathetically. Oh, what's the rest of your family like? Oh, we're just the average family, he thought. Mother, father, 2.58 children, and as I explained, I'm the 0.58. It must be rather odd only being part of a person. Not at all, said the child. Every average family has 2.58 children, so I always have someone to play with. Besides, each family also has an average of 1.3 automobiles, and since I'm the only one who can drive 3/10 of a car, I get to use it all the time. But averages aren't real. They're just imaginary. That may be so, he agreed, but they're also very useful at times. For instance, if you didn't have any money at all, but you happened to be with 4 other people who had $10 apiece, then you'd each have an average of $8. Isn't that right? I guess so, said Milo weakly. Now let me pause for a moment to explain averages. Averages are we look at like a lot of different people, and we find out what they might have, and then we add it all together, and then we divide it by the number of people to find out, like, well, what is, like, for most people, what most people have. For example, I'll give you an example. It might be easier. Let's say we're talking about math tests, averages. All right. Let's say Kate, she made a 60 on her math test. Bummer. Let's say John made a 90 on his math test. Let's say Britta made 100 on her math test. Let's say that how about let's say Haley made 100 on her math test. She'll be so happy. And let's see that Micah made 100 on his math test. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. Now, out of the people, they all have very different scores. But if I added all their scores together, so I would add, that's 150, right? 150. And then plus 300, because that's 100, 200, 300, would be 450. And now to find the average, I would divide 450 by 5. So I'd have to think about it 5. Well, I know the answer to this because I'm an adult. So the answer is 90. Basically, in this class of 5 people, on average, they all got a 90. Now, did everybody actually get a 90? No. But technically, if Britta had given 10 points to Kate, and Haley had given 10 points to Kate, and Micah had given 10 points to Kate, then they would all have basically 90. So 90 is just a way that we can tell, like, about overall, how did people do on this quiz? So if I want to say, hey, how well did my class do? Did they understand? Well, the average was 90, so my class did a really good job. They really did understand, even if one student didn't. So that's kind of the purpose of an average. So when they say 2.58 kids, each family has 2.58 kids, that means that, like, when they added everybody up in the whole United States, they figured out how many people the people in the United States had, how many kids. So while I don't have any kids, your family might have 5, or your family might have 2, or maybe you just have 1. They add all of those numbers up, and then they divide by the number of people in the United States, and then they say, hey, most people have 2.58 kids. Anyway, that kind of hopefully explains averages. But let's get back to the actual reading of it, because that's important. All right, so here we go. Averages aren't real, objected Milo. They're imaginary. That may be so, he agreed, but they're also very useful at times. For instance, if you didn't have any money at all, and you happened to be with 4 other people who had $10 apiece, then you each have an average of $8. Isn't that right? I guess so, said Milo weakly. Well, think about how much better off you'd be just because of averages, he explained convincingly. And think of the poor farmer when it doesn't rain all year. If there wasn't an average yearly rainfall of 37 inches in this part of the country, all its crops would wither and die. It all sounded terribly confusing to Milo, for he always had trouble in school with just this subject. For there are still other advantages, continued the child. For instance, if one rat were courted by 9 cats, then on average, each cat would be 10% rat, and the rat would be 90% cat. If you happen to be a rat, you can see how much nicer it would make things. But that can never be, said Milo, jumping to his feet. Don't be too sure, said the child patiently, for one of the nicest things about mathematics, or anything else you might care to learn, is that many of the things which never can be, often are, you see, he went on. It's very much like you're trying to reach infinity. You know that it's there, but you don't know where. Just because you can never reach it doesn't mean that it's not worth looking for. I hadn't thought of it that way, said Milo, starting down the stairs. I think I'll go back now. A wise decision, the child agreed. But try again someday. Perhaps you'll get much closer. And Milo waved goodbye. And as Milo waved goodbye, he smiled warmly, as he usually did on the average of 47 times per day. Everyone here knows so much more than I do, thought Milo, as he leaped from step to step. I'll have to do a lot better if I'm going to rescue the princesses. In a few moments he reached the bottom again and burst into the workshop where Talk, the humbug, and the humbug were eagerly watching the Mathemagician perform. Ah, back already, he cried, greeting him with a friendly wave. "I hope you found what you were looking for." "I'm afraid not," admitted Milo, and then he added in a very discouraged tone, "Everything in Digitopolis is much too difficult for me." Ooh, I wonder if some of us have some connection with Milo right there. The Mathemagician nodded, knowingly stroked his chin several times. Why don't you pause and act that out? Knowingly stroke your chin several times. Yes, like you're deep in thought. Very good. "You'll find," he remarked gently, "that the only thing you can do easily." Aha, listen to this. "You'll find," he remarked gently, "that the only thing you can do easily is be wrong. And that's hardly worth the effort." So that's the thing we're going to come back to. Milo tried very hard to understand all the things he'd been told and all the things he'd seen. And as he spoke, one curious thing still bothered him. "Why is it," he said quietly, "that quite often even the things which are correct just don't seem to be right?" A look of deep melancholy crossed the Mathemagician's face, and his eyes grew moist with sadness. Everything was silent, and it was several minutes before he was able to reply at all. "How very true," he sobbed, supporting himself on his staff. "It has been this way since rhyme and reason were banished." "Quite so," began the humbug. "I personally feel that, and all because of that stubborn wretch Azaz," roared the Mathemagician, completely overwhelming the bug, for now his sadness has changed to fury, and he stalked about the room, adding up anger and multiplying it by wrath. "It's all his fault." "Perhaps if you discussed it with him," Milo started to say, but he never had time to finish.
"He's much too unreasonable," interrupted the Mathemagician again. "Why, just last month I sent him a very friendly letter, which he never had the courtesy to answer. See for yourself."
He handed Milo a copy of the letter, which read, 4,738, 919, 667, 394,017, 5,841, 62,589, 85,371, 14, 39,588, 1,190,434, 203, 27,689, 57,131, 481,206, 5,864, 98,053, and then Miss Canterbury's got to look for a second. 62,179,875,073. "Maybe he doesn't understand numbers," said Milo, who found it very difficult to read himself. A little difficult to read himself.
"Nonsense," he bellowed. "Everyone understands numbers." "Oh, I'm sorry. Nonsense," he bellowed. "Nonsense," he bellowed. "Everyone understands numbers. No matter what language you speak, they always mean the same thing. A 7 is a 7 anywhere in the world."
My goodness, thought Milo. Everybody is so terribly sensitive about the things they know best. Also think about that. Let's reread it again so we can really think about it. My goodness, thought Milo. Everybody is so terribly sensitive about the things they know best.
"With your permission," said Talk, changing the subject, "we'd like to rescue Rhyme and Reason." "Has Azaz agreed to it?" the Mathemagician inquired.
"Yes, sir," the dog assured him.
"Then I don't," he thundered again, for since they've been banished, we've never agreed on anything, and we never will."
He emphasized his last remark with a dark, ominous look. "Never?" asked Milo with the slightest touch of disbelief in his voice.
"Never," he repeated. "And if you can prove otherwise, then you have my permission to go."
"Well," said Milo, who had thought about this problem very carefully since leaving Dictionopolis, "then whatever Azaz agrees with, you disagree."
"Correct,"
said the Mathematician in a tolerant smile. "And whatever Azaz disagrees with, you agree."
"Also correct."
yawned the mathematician, nonchalantly cleaning his fingers with the point of his staff. Then each of you agrees that he will disagree with whatever each of you agrees with, said Milo triumphantly. And if you both disagree with the same thing, then aren't you really in agreement? I've been tricked, cried the mathematician helplessly, for no matter how he figured, it all still came out just that way. Splendid effort, commented the humbug jovially. Exactly the way I would have done it myself. And now may we go? Added Talk. The mathematician accepted his defeat with grace, nodded weakly, and drew the three travelers to his side. It's a long, dangerous journey, he began softly. Ooh, I have to begin softly. Let me go back. It's a long, dangerous journey, he began softly. Long before you find them, the demons will know you're there. Watch for them well, he emphasized, for when they appear, it might be too late. The humbug shuddered down to his shoes, and Milo felt the tips of his fingers suddenly grow cold. But there is one problem even more serious than that, he whispered ominously. What is it? Gasped Milo, who was not sure he really wanted to know. I'm afraid I can only tell you when you return. Come along, said the mathematician, and I'll show you the way. And simply by carrying the three, he transported them all to the very edge of Digitopolis. Behind them lay all the kingdoms of wisdom, and up ahead a narrow, rutted path led toward the mountains and darkness. We'll never get the car up that, said Milo unhappily. True enough, replied the mathematician, but you can be in ignorance quick enough without riding all the way. And if you're successful, it will have to be step by step. But I would like to take my guess, he insisted. So you shall, announced the dodecahedron, who appeared from nowhere, his arms full. Here are your sights, here are your sounds, and here, he said, handing Milo the last of them disdainfully, are your words. And most important of all, added the mathematician, here is your own magic staff. Use it well, and there is nothing you cannot do. He placed in Milo's breast pocket a small, gleaming pencil, except for the size, which was much like his own. Then the last word of encouragement, he and the dodecahedron, who was simultaneously sobbing, frowning, pining, and sighing from four of his saddest faces, made their farewells and watched as the three tiny figures disappeared into the forbidding mountains of ignorance. Now we're going to pause there. And I'm going to pause there using my average thing. So we are about, and there you go. There they are. He gave him, there he is, carrying them. And then look, there's the mountains from where he is. So now Milo is armed. He's armed with sounds from the Soundkeeper. He's armed with words, right, from King Azaz. He's armed with a pencil from the Mathemagician, and he is also armed with sights, right, from Alec Bing. So now he's got all of these important things with him, and they're going to go and try to rescue the princesses, right? Now, we haven't heard about the very dirty bird. This is a longer chapter, so we're going to split it in two, and then we'll start the next chapter on Monday. So, really quickly, what I wanted to bring up, okay, is the quote that I wanted you to think about. Where is it? It's back this way. This is what I want you to think. Here we go. There were two things I said you could think about, but this is the one I want us to focus. Blah, blah, blah. This is what I want us to focus on, okay? You'll find that the only thing that you can do easily is to be wrong, and that's hardly worth the effort. So I want you to think about that, okay? And also it says so you'll find that the only thing you could do easily is to be wrong, and that's hardly worth the effort. What is that saying? What does that mean? What does he mean by that? All right. Thank you for staying with me during the Read Aloud. Remember, shared reading today is live at 1 o'clock on Microsoft Teams. We're going to share read Pearl together. All right? All right, guys. Have a great day.